Hi, and welcome to the program. I'm Tyler Martinolich, Film Commissioner for Hillsborough County. Today I'm joined by director, producer, Pete Guzzo. Welcome to the program.
Hey, thanks for having me, Tyler.
Before we get into your backstory, you did bring some video with us, so
Yep.
let's start with the demo reel. All right. Well, thank you for joining us today. Why I had you here is I really wanted to get into, one, your backstory, but also talk about directing and producing and how you move from feature films over to commercial productions. But first, I'd like to start with what I call the good housekeeping questions.
Okay.
So let's get the background information out of the way. How did you, Pete Guzzo, find yourself where you are today?
It was interesting. I was a radio major, communication, when I lived in New Jersey. I moved down to Tampa and started University of Tampa 1.5 years into college, where I learned University of Tampa. At that point, the radio station didn't go out past a mile. So I kind of got a little turned off by that. So then I was trying to figure out, what do I go into now? My communication and law professor was also the lawyer for the public access channel. We went there. They told us how they'll teach you for free for 12 weeks how to produce a television series, how to learn cameras, lighting. And honestly, ever since then, I never looked back.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I started a little about me as a medieval Japanese history major, because that's really useful,
Yes.
right?
Sure.
So how did you transition from radio to TV? Was there a similar shared interest? Was it telling stories?
You know, it was storytelling. Even when I was in my undergrad, I was originally a philosophy major and a radio communication major. So I always had that storytelling capability and the love for telling stories.
Mm-hmm.
People today, I just make up stuff all the time. So when I got to start doing the television series, me and my brother, who is a writer and has been my main screenwriter anytime we produce any film, we started writing a show. And at first it started off where it was just us on camera, and then it turned into, why don't we write some skits? And then I bought like a GL1 back in 2001, if people remember that is, and we started shooting skits, which was interesting. So I was like, well, this is cool. And then Final Cut 1 came out, put it on the bubble iMac, and I started learning how to edit. And really at that point I realized I like to direct. I wasn't a director by any means back then, but I started learning how to storytell using visuals, writing, audio, music, and all the other graphics, all the components that it takes to tell a great story. And that eventually evolved into me, all right, I'm gonna switch my major into visual communication at the time at University of Tampa, which now they have, it's called film and television. And then I got lucky. I had a professor who was a great film professor, you know, very blunt, very straightforward. If you weren't doing your job correctly, even if it was your first film, he let you know. So I started learning the rules of filmmaking and storytelling early on, and that just kept me wanting to make more films and more films, make a lot of mistakes along the ways. And I guess I'm always great at taking criticism. So I loved making mistakes and then learn how to make them better. And that really helped just with visual storytelling.
Yeah. So would a 10-year-old or a 12-year-old Pete Guzzo recognize who you are today? I mean, was there anything in your childhood that, looking back, you know, you always had that instinct to be a storyteller, or would he be impressed where you're at today?
I think he would. I think 12-year-old Pete, 10-year-old Pete would love where I am now, because when I'm 10 and 12, a lot of kids, when you're at home and no one's around, or when you're with your friends, you make up stories as you go on. You're on your bikes and you're pretending that you're an Iron Eagle. Like, so I always had that fantasy of telling stories. And it's great that 12-year-old Pete would see me now and be like, wow, now you actually tell stories and make money.
Yeah.
So all the nonsense I was doing when I was little, making up stories to my parents or making up stories with my friends and having fun. Building those fake forts when you're a kid, like, actually evolved into something that is a career.
So you mentioned moving over to public access as sort of a jumpstart to your foundational career as a filmmaker. Most people don't even realize public access is still around, but it is still very vibrant. It's one of the few outlets for people in the community to voice their opinions. It provides an opportunity for people to come to an outlet where they can tell a story or create a show or just speak to their own public interests. For those of you who've never tuned in to public access, think Wayne's World. It's very similar, to be perfectly honest, from how it was portrayed in the movie. How did that shape your career? What sort of tools did you learn in public access that are still with you today?
Really what helped, and it was very much like the Wild West back then, in 2001, 2, and I think my last stint there was around 2003. We just had fun. You know, the good thing about doing it when I was younger is I had nothing to lose. So we would do skits. People would call up on the phone and make fun of our skits, or they would love them, or whatever that was. We'd see people in public. Like I said, it was a Wild West back then. It was insane that people would watch public access and recognized us out in the public. So that kind of enlightened me as well. Like, all right, we're actually doing something that gets people impressed. So really the one thing I took away from that, like, 2 years there, and I think we did like 50 episodes or whatever, was really the fact that we like to tell stories. My brother learned that he was not only a good newspaper, because he went in for journalism, he could also write films and skits. So really it was, not to be redundant, but it was the storytelling that really kept us moving, and that's what we really took. We started there learning technical, technical light switches, cameras, and then I learned how to shoot in the field versus the studio, and all that was great. But all the technical skills, I still know, and that constantly just evolves every year. Everyone knows this with technology. But it was the storytelling, and just to know that you loved something as passionate as what I did back then, even as I would never show anybody them anymore. But that kind of kept me moving. That's the one thing I still have today.
So looking back at your sort of holistic educational career, would you recommend someone, perhaps, their senior year of high school, they're trying to figure out what to do, maybe college is an option. Is there value in going to a traditional film school, or would you recommend someone just go out there and start working on productions, or find an internship maybe at a public access or a local news channel?
I mean, most of my recommendations to young students if they're in high school is, if you're going to do it, do it. Go out there, shoot something. Don't worry if it's the best thing in the world when you're 17, 18. Just figure out, do I like to do this? If you can produce something, and this is even before college, or if you're in college, if you can produce something from writing the script all the way to finish it in a timely manner to post-production, you're probably interested in. I have students that sometimes they get to the post-production and they just kind of disappear. So that's when I'll be like, well, then you really love what you do. As far as college, I'm still a big believer in college if it makes sense for what you want to do. I think it's great to learn the foundations of just everything college teaches you. However, if not everyone can afford college and you find yourself to be a great filmmaker, I mean, there are two-year schools as well. Yeah. College for me, I needed it. I kind of needed those learning lessons and had to study at night, and because I never was a great studier, so all that kind of pushed and motivated me. But to tell someone they have to go to college, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I went through, I got my film degree, I learned what I wanted to do. I don't think I would have learned I like filmmaking if it wasn't for college. So if you don't know what you want to do in life, I think college is a great outlet. The one takeaway I did have was with my film professor in undergrad, I told him I wanted to go get my master's in arts. And he was like, why? I go, I don't know, because I want to study more film. He's like, you've already shot student films. You just got to keep learning how to do it better. He's like, go get your MBA. And really that was a turning point in my life when I got my marketing degree at University of Tampa. Because that kind of changed things for me, just wanting to be a director to learning how to be an executive producer. Even though we didn't talk about anything about film in my graduate studies, it kind of, that knowledge of filmmaking and bringing that with the business degree really helped.
So let's transition now away from education to your current career. I know you've done documentaries, you've done feature films, you've done a ton of commercials. What was the first in that order? Did you start out in features, then transition to commercials, or have you always sort of vacillated between the different formats?
I didn't know anything about advertising or commercials until a little later in my life. So definitely filmmaking was the start of it. We did independent film, Joy Story, which was a student film. But then we did an independent film called 99. And that just it was a ridiculous plot about a guy who had to sleep with 100 women before he graduated school. And hence, it just was like, what were we doing? And there's literally 4 of us that shot the whole thing for like 30 days. This is what we did. We had about 50 actors in it, which is insane. And it went to film festivals all over the country, and it was great because we went to LA, we're in New York, we're in small towns in Oklahoma. My brother can tell you more about these. It was so fun traveling and seeing the film festival circuit.
Yeah.
So that kind of provoked us to do, all right, that was fun. Why don't we do something a little more serious? And that's when we did Charlie Wall, a documentary. Mm-hmm. And that's when I was like, wow, I didn't know I loved documentary work so much. But documentaries, when you're filming them, they're just a living script. We started one way for the documentary, one direction, and it completely turned into us doing a documentary about this guy, Charlie Wall. And then that moved me forward to want to do something a little bit more narrative. That's when we did Caged Dreams back in 2010, 2011, I believe. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of more a higher end film that we raised money for and produced. So really filmmaking all the way to Caged Dreams was all I wanted to do.
So let's go back to your festival experience. Was it validating looking back to see your film that you've spent 30 days, your blood, sweat, and tears making on a big screen and actually being there present to see an audience consume your work and then react to it?
Yeah, the film festivals, if you make a film, push and get into as many film festivals as you can. It is costly to enter them, but man, what a rewarding experience. We went, like I said, we were at the New York Film Festival in Greenwich Village and other places around the city with other filmmakers, seeing your film on a big screen and looking around and seeing who's laughing, who's not laughing. Yeah. Same thing as Caged Dreams, seeing who is getting excited versus the people who are maybe talking and not as interested. But the best experience about film festivals is the camaraderie the filmmakers have. We never went to a Sundance or anything that scale. So the film festivals we went to, people are helping each other get people into the seats of the audience.
Yeah. So let's talk about Charlie Wall for a second. Documentaries are a very different beast. You might have an idea of a script, or if not a script, an end trajectory. Where am I going with this story? But once you start talking to different people, different subjects, interviewing them, it's sort of its own beast. It takes on its own life. So how do you, as a director or a filmmaker, take someone that you don't know where they're going to go from point A to point B and still craft a narrative at the end of the day?
The special thing about Charlie Wall documentary was originally it was about Santo Trafficante Jr. And my brother started lining up all the interviews to do. And we were getting good sound bites, but that's what we were getting. We're getting sound bites. We had a couple tell us some full stories, but people still don't want to talk about the Trafficante family back in like 2007, which isn't that long ago, but they didn't want to talk about him. But then people started talking more about Charlie Wall.
Charlie Wall, and I didn't understand it, was our hero.
Charlie Wall was one of the most colorful characters in the history of Tampa, a community with a long line of flamboyant characters.
He paved the way for organized crime in Tampa and throughout Florida.
And my brother knew about him, and I knew what my brother knew, but we didn't know all these other stories. And the more and more we learned about this Charlie Wall character, the more questions my brother and myself would ask. So then we're like, all right, well, let's not stop asking the Trafficante questions, but let's start shaping this story about Charlie Wall, the guy who was an Anglo-Saxon mafia, awkward-looking guy back in the late 1800s. And that is not the kind of guy you'd see running a mafia and running numbers and people being feared of. It was always the immigrants who were the mafia. So that's what was just such an interesting story. We're like, we think we have something, let's go with it.
How far into the production were you when you realized that this is actually the focus of my documentary?
I don't remember how many days, but probably about, I'm going to say about 3 hours of footage before we realized, all right, we need to start going into Charlie Wall.
And you mentioned earlier, keep filming, keep doing things to really see if you're passionate about filmmaking. And you did mention the editing room, post-production. That's where you realize whether this is your game or not. And particularly with documentaries, where you're having to slog through hours and hours of interviews. Talk about the post process on a documentary.
So the post process for the documentary, and even today I still do it. I always do the interviews first because I don't know what's going to happen. Sometimes people want to plan around doing some reenactments or whatever that may be. So the post process for a documentary, it's let's cut our story together. It doesn't have to be the finished piece, but that's what I learned right away. I was like, all right, let's hold off on anything that's going to cost more money than an interview. So we sat down and we started doing a long edit, about an hour and a half edit, and we're like, well, it's too long. So we learned how to start trimming the story down. But then at the same time, we realized, all right, there's plot holes we need to fill in. So that's when we learned, all right, we need to go find more people to interview to fill in these holes in the film, which is very interesting. You would never do that on a narrative. You would never shoot a narrative and then go back and be like, hey, we have to reshoot 40% of this because the script we found out sucked.
Yeah.
So we finally got all the interviews done and the story was there. Then I learned, all right, we need to do reenactments for this much content with budget, realize that. Then we had the discovery, all right, I still don't have enough money to do enough reenactments. So we started coming up with a plan, well, why don't we create artwork? And I had artists create all this different artwork that we had cut to and animate as well. And it just kind of snowballed like that, realizing, all right, this is a proper way to make a documentary. And it was successful till today. People keep watching it, which is great.
And you didn't have a background in documentary
not at all
before that. So this was really trial by fire. You were sort of figuring out how to do it as you went along.
Yeah. It was even any film we did.
Yeah.
I didn't know what I was doing half the time. We kind of figured it out. And the documentary especially was challenging because, it's like I never made a documentary. So I was just trying to figure it out, watch other documentaries, see what famous filmmakers, how they told stories. But the funny thing is about not knowing what we were doing, our first student film we made, Joy Story. We took over a bar for 6 weeks every Sunday, early Sunday morning and every early Monday morning. We showed up when the bar shut down, we blacked it out and we reshot it. A month goes by and we're having a beer at the bar and me and my brother look at each other and be like, I can't believe we just shot a whole narrative. We don't even really know that much about filmmaking. I was in my senior year, I was still like a junior. And the actors go, wait, you guys never made a film before? I go, I had no idea what I was doing. I was just winging it. I was like, I think this is working.
So how do you not just in documentaries, but we'll just talk about your career at large. How did you find a comfortable voice as a director in interacting with talent, whether that's an interview subject who has no background in filming or acting, or an actual actor who this has been their professional career? How have you found your own voice and your own ability to interact and talk and direct these people?
I think one of the things that I've never grown up, I'm still a kid, so when it comes to actors, I can make them feel very comfortable and relaxed, and then I can get a little bit more serious, be like, all right, now let's dive into your character, the backgrounds, and how to develop him on camera, not just behind the camera and script. And so I think that has been very resourceful. Directing is a scary thing when you're going into it because in your head, you know what you want the actors to convey, how you want the characters to be voiced through that actor, but then actually get them to do what you want is a completely different story. So I think just trying to be relaxed, make them feel relaxed, and really just be confident in what I want them to do. And that way they believe me and then they'll believe their character. But at the same time, give them a little bit of freedom to interject how they think that character should be voiced at the same time.
Right.
And so that really kind of plays into it. You either, to be honest, I think you either have it or you don't in this industry. And it also depends on the genre that you're a director for. You're either going to be a good director or you're not. I'm not discouraging people not to do that, but learn early on the first 4 or 5 years. If you're able to work with an actor and develop the character, then you may be a good director. As far as interviews, we just did it was just a corporate documentary a while ago, like 3 or 4 weeks ago, but this is like all documentaries and PSAs with interviews. You just have to talk to the person, hear what they're saying, because no matter what you read about them, they're going to say something different. They're going to give you more than what you read about them or what they wrote down. And then listen to what they're saying and then reformulate the question again later on. Be like, all right, he said that, but that was too long-winded. Let me try to get him to say it again shorter. And then I'll ask the question again. I'll be like, I'm sorry I'm asking you the question again, but I just know there's more. And then it's crazy. If the person is good on camera, all of a sudden it'll click and they'll give you the most remarkable soundbite in the world. You just have to help them get to that point.
Yeah. Define for me what a director does, or how do you approach directing? What are the sort of the tasks that you take on, and what do you leave for other people to do?
For me as a director, which is different, I remember talking to another local seasoned director here. He directs completely differently. I do a lot of homework and a lot of research about the script that we have in hand, the way the characters need to be played out, but I also work on the timing, especially because now I do a lot more commercial work, so it's all about timing. So I just do pre-production out the yin-yang, just constantly going back, studying the characters again, trying to develop them a little bit more, so the time I get on set with them, everyone's really prepared. And that I always tell people, have your A-plan so down pat, so when you get on set and things change, you're able to move and change with the actor or whoever, and the DP and the crew, because you've been so buttoned up on plan A, you're able to shift to plan B if that's necessary.
Yeah. Let's transition now more towards commercial work, which I think is where the lion's share of what you're doing now is. How do you still tell an engaging story when you're not working with necessarily a through line or a 3-act structure and it's a product? I'm coming to you and say, here's a Seiko watch. Tell me a story around a Seiko watch.
Right.
How do you approach that?
That is interesting, because now when you're doing a commercial, let's say the traditional broadcast, 30 seconds, maybe 60 if you're lucky. Obviously social media is a little different now, but you're also working with someone who's paying you to tell a story about their brand, their product, their business. And in our world, we work with ad agencies a lot. So now we're working with a client and an ad agency, and we're trying to tell everybody's story about the product and the brand at best. It's capably get done. But the cool part about directing for commercials is you get to pack a punch into 30 seconds. And our budget sometimes for a commercial is as much as an independent film. So we can come up with just the most creative storytelling, shots that I would never be able to do in a film sometimes, work with some top talent, because we're able to we only need them there for a day or two to talk about this product and to really sell the story behind the brand. But that's the interesting part. Some retail spots, sometimes it's just product. You're directing, and your directing capabilities are kind of dialed down because we're shooting a product. The product has to be on screen for 15 seconds. So your story has to be even more honed in, because you may have 12 seconds of actually storytelling, and then they cut 2 product shots. However, when you're doing more about a brand, like we produced a Seiko commercial, that was about Jimmy Johnson, NASCAR driver. The watch was there, and we cut the shots of it, but it was really the storytelling of Jimmy Johnson get into the school on time to pick up his kids. But we don't reveal where he's going until the very end. Then you realize he's at the school. And that kind of happens with a lot of the work we do. Is I try to come up with, whether it's with an agency or a client alone, try to come up with some reveal at the end. That way you had this story, you cut to the product, and then there at least is a little bit of a wow factor at the end. And we actually just did that with Navy Federal Credit Union as well, which is very interesting. It's more of a story than their product. It was more about the brand and getting people's attention about Navy Federal Credit Union with a little bit about product.
How do you approach filming something, again, whether it's a short film, feature, commercial, where you weren't necessarily in the process of writing the script, but you're handed something and now it's like, go produce something that I had nothing to do with as far as the development or the creation of? How do you do you approach it differently from something that you wrote, created, conceived yourself, and something that someone handed you and say, now go off and direct my material? Yeah,
we do. And just to give a quick example, for the Navy Federal, we wrote it, we came up with the concepts, so we lived inside of it. So we knew exactly how it should play out from the beginning, which does make life a little easier. However, anytime you do that, you still have an outside ear and eye to pull it apart. And the reason I bring that up is because when I'm producing something for an ad agency that a creative writer wrote, now I got to look at it and be like, all right, what are they trying to do? You know, I can't just ask the creative director tell me your vision, but you can't just rely on that alone. You need to read the script and you'd be like, all right, what are they trying to convey? He told me what he wants to convey, but now let me really dig deep into the script. Let me dig deep into the concept and pull it apart. It's like a puzzle, pull it apart. Will it go back together perfectly, or are there going to be holes and you need to fill in that? And that's how I approach any script for a commercial or social media thing that somebody hands me is, let's pull it apart. Does this really work? Where are the flaws in it? There's always going to be flaws.
Yeah.
You need to find them. And the main thing is you can't be scared to voice your opinion to the writer or creative director or client. You have to question things. You got to look at it and just be like, why are we doing this? Or I have a better idea. And so it comes down to a lot of times really voicing your opinion about that script, how it should be directed, how it should be executed, not to be afraid to stick up for what you believe in, because that's the only way anyone's going to believe you if you're convincing.
Yeah.
And then also know when to back down. You know, pick your battle. A couple things we did for University of Florida, we picked our battles. We won some things on the commercial we shot. Another thing, they convinced us, no, we're right. And be like, yeah, you are, okay. But it's just kind of balance between you and the client or the agency.
Yeah. Hey, you know, commercials are such a different beast because it is a service art.
Yeah.
Someone's paying you sometimes a lot of money to create content for them. How do you, as a director, sort of step back and sort of swallow your own pride or your own creative instincts when you have a agency person or perhaps the client himself yelling from the RV, you know, hey, I don't want that shot or I want this.
Right.
You mentioned picking your battles. What's most important to you on a film set? What are the elements that you're going to fight for every time?
Execution is one. So I'll talk about just from a director and a producer standpoint. As a director, it's going to come down to the execution. I really want to make sure that, and this is after, once I pick my battles during the script thing and we're on set, that's one thing. You know, I may win some, I may lose some. I always believe in the rule of three. If I voice my opinion 2 times, and then I voice my opinion 3rd time, and the client or the agency's like, no, I'd be like, okay.
Moving on.
I'm moving on. Let me find something else to work on with this commercial. And so that's sometimes it's tricky. It is a service art. So young directors, I tell all the time, is pick your battles. If the client is saying no, this is the way the story, the script needs to be shot. Okay, it's a service art. Figure out what is the best way to produce and direct what they want. You're not always going to have your vision. They're hiring you because they don't know how to execute what they want, but they know they want it. So then it's like, now let me get excited about how am I going to produce this for them? And that happens all the time. And I got to talk myself or another director into get excited about something to make sure you tell their story correctly. Otherwise, it's not going to come out really well. It's not going to tell their story. It's not going to make you look good. And then, you know, you potentially going to lose a client. So always try to fight for what you want.
Yeah.
And if they're saying, no, you're wrong, we're right. Like, okay, now let me tell your story exactly the way you want, the best way it can be told.
Have you ever been presented with a situation where you're working with a client or a particular product and you realize perhaps early on in the pre-production phase where I'm just not right for this? And have you stepped away or do you always just try to muscle through and figure out a way? Because you've got to keep that conveyor belt of cash coming in to be a sustained production company.
So yes, and that's why I started a production company versus just being a director. I realized what my traits are as a director. For whatever reason, good at shooting culinary. I'm good at telling product retail stuff. I'm good at PSAs because of my documentary. I try not to jump into comedy too much, even though we just wrote a comedy. I had Kip direct it. So I started realizing what I'm good at. And that's when I decided to, all right, let me find other directors who think like me, but are good at directing different genres versus me trying to sell myself as a comedy director or trying to sell myself as a horror director. So I'm not those things. And that's when I started bringing in Kip, Ricardo, Mike, and the other directors on our slate because of that reason alone. And I tell people, don't try to direct everything. Find what you're good at and direct that because everyone's mindsets are different. Not everyone likes to watch horror. Not everybody likes to watch comedy. if you don't like to watch horror, you probably shouldn't direct a horror film.
Yeah. So moving back towards the narrative space, when you're directing a narrative, whether it's a documentary or a traditional feature film, as a director, are you consciously thinking about the audience's experience, or are you just looking at what's in front of you and directing your own movie sort of divorced from outside criticism?
You know, there's a couple, sometimes my mind changes. When we're doing a documentary, it was, let's tell the best version of this documentary that we think we want to tell. And that's exactly what we did. When we did Caged Dreams, I remember before Paul even started writing the script, I was like, this is going to be a film festival movie. We had investors. I was like, we need to win awards. And I remember him getting upset with me. He was like, I'd start talking about the opening credit sequence before the script. He was like, stop talking. I was like, people need to watch the first minute of this and be so wowed, they're going to want to watch it. I need to create an experience in the opening title sequence so people's minds are checked in and they want to watch this. And then I remember I was like, and let's not have a whole lot of dialogue. People want to see action. So we really formed Caged Dreams based off of my brother's knowledge of mixed martial arts, the entertainment factor, but what we knew people would want to watch at a film festival. And really, that's how that came to be. So I do shift my mind back and forth. When I do PSAs, a lot of time I'm not concerned. I'm concerned with the audience, but when we did a human trafficking one, I was like, I'm not concerned if the audience is going to be spooked or if they're going to feel uncomfortable. I was like, I'm going to make something that makes them feel uncomfortable, regardless of what they want to see. I was like, this is what they're going to see, and they're going to learn from that.
Okay. Let's talk about some anecdotes on set that perhaps someone can learn from. I don't think people really, unless you've been on a commercial set, you don't realize the pressure because it's expedited. You only have a couple of days to facilitate what could have been a 3-week shoot in some cases, especially if it was translated to like an independent film or a narrative film.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the Seiko commercial a little earlier. Let's talk about the production of that Seiko commercial and some of the problems that you ran into during production that you had to figure out as you went, and you know, sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. So
the Seiko commercial is probably one of the most intense productions I've been part of. We were challenged from the client and the agency. The agency, just to give a little background, the agency is out of Japan, Dentsu. They do have a U.S. office, but mainly Japan. They teamed up with Gravity USA, and they hired us to produce a one-day commercial for Seiko in Atlanta. So every day for 3 weeks, this is before I started prep. For 3 weeks, we had a phone call at 8 o'clock at night when Japan got to the office, and we talked for 3 hours with people from all over the world. I heard Indian accents, Japanese accents, I heard Australian accents, and I don't know, I've never seen these people, so it was very intense. So me and the whole production team are talking with them, forming our strategy, telling them about how this is how the production's going to run in Atlanta. The Japanese agency's never been to Atlanta. The New York company didn't know much about Atlanta. So that was like the first thing. How do we make all these people coming from around the world feel comfortable that when they show up, we're going to be able to produce their commercial and make it flawless for them.
Yeah.
Second challenge was when we started getting the prep. We had about 4 weeks of prep in Atlanta leading up to the shoot day. And the reason there was so much prep was we had 1 day to shoot it. And it was with Jimmy Johnson, the NASCAR driver, and we only had him for 6 hours. 6 hours is not a lot of time to shoot an action-filled commercial. We had Jimmy Johnson in a garage, walk into a car. We had driving shots. I don't know if everyone knows what a car-to-car is, but literally we had a minivan with a bungee system shooting a car, a Camaro, driving around the city. We had another setup with a car on a process trailer with a camera truck behind it, which is basically pulling a trailer and the car secure, and you have camera people on the process trailer locked in, shooting Jimmy Johnson, pretending to drive around the city. We had a photo shoot going on that we needed to do, and they also, since Jimmy Johnson was there, of course we had to do a behind the scenes with them and do a audio take with them. So we had, in order to get that done, we had to create 4 separate teams. We had enough people to shoot a feature film. We had one team that had the garage shot. So they lit the car in the garage for when Jimmy Johnson was walking up. Problem with that is we only had Jimmy Johnson 6 hours. There's no way to shoot him opening the door, so we had to hire a body double. So for the first hour, we had a body double getting all the close-ups of the watch, opening the doors and everything. While that was going on, we had a second Camaro. The second Camaro is being put onto the process trailer, locked in, rigged, with another crew that's lighting that. So when that was going on, we had car-to-car shots. So we had from the van shooting the Camaro driving around the city at an angle such that you couldn't tell that it wasn't Jimmy Johnson inside of the car. And when that was going on around the time they were wrapping the garage, we had a photo team setting up. So we had about, if you looked at our call sheet, we had about 60 crew members on it. We had 3 or 4 producers, a production manager, an AD, and a second AD, all working to pull this off. And we had to make the client feel so comfortable that, yes, we can get Jimmy Johnson in the car in the garage. As soon as he was done that, we're like, hey, Jimmy Johnson, our AD, be like, hey, sir, now you're just going to come over here and you're going to go inside of the process trailer in the car. So then we drove him around and we shot him shooting all the car stuff inside the process trailer. As soon as that got done, it's like, hey, Jimmy, now you got to go to a photo shoot. And now we have all the PAs scrambling to get him over to the photo shoot. And now he's at the photo shoot with the car and the watch. And then, you know, it's like we have 2 hours left. We already did all that in 4 hours. Now we're going down to a school for the final scene where another Camaro is already there, another crew's lit, you have the motorhome, all the chairs, tents is set up so when the client gets there, we're basically ready for them to get comfortable again and shoot the car in front of the school. And logistically, a commercial shouldn't take a month to prep for.
Yeah.
But it took us a month in order to make this machine work.
So obviously there's a ton of prep and research in the pre-production phase, but when you're actually on set that day, were you worrying about every little detail, or are you just trying to stay in the moment and focus on the shots you're getting, or are you in the back of your head panicked, like, are they getting the school lit correctly? Are we going to be able to have time to get from point A to point B?
No, you know what? The day of the shoot was the most relaxing part of it. Because it was, all right, we know we're going to be in the garage first. Went in the garage, checked in with the AD, the car. Yes, everything's good, Pete. Okay, so John, my producer, would stay there. I'd move over to the next set where the car in the process trailer with the next producer, then walk over to the next set for the car-to-car with the other producer. And at that point, we were pretty buttoned up. There wasn't anything we couldn't accomplish. There was no weather going on, which was good, so we didn't have that. That's the only time I get concerned is weather. Yeah. But no, we were so buttoned up, we literally just went from one set to the next, and we wrapped in a 10-hour day with a 60-person crew.
And how insulated is the client from all the chaos going around? Is that, you know, out of sight, out of mind, like everything's fine, or are they aware of, or can they sense the panic sometimes?
No, we don't let the client know anything going on. Everything is perfect. Nothing's wrong, nothing to see here. Once in a while, the client, at one point, it's funny, it would be like, hey, where are all the tables, chairs, or whatever for the photo scene? And we're like, oh, they're on their way. We just had a little issue with traffic. So literally I had one of my producers driving up in this giant cargo van and laying all the tables and chairs out behind the van. And he goes, no, they're right here. Move the van. Oh, that's where everything is. Yeah, they're there the whole time.
So there's a little bit of magic and sleight of hand going on.
Oh, God, yeah. And I have to, on that job, I was a producer, an executive producer, so I had to stay on. Sometimes you have to stay on the client and the agency and the director. And we had to get done in a 10-hour. Jimmy had to get out of there 6. If we went into OT, it would have been OT for 60 people. It would cost tens of thousands of dollars. Yeah. So when that happens, you just have to, as a producer, go to your director and be like, we got 15 minutes. You know, I'm very stern-faced, we got 15 minutes. And I'm watching him do the product shots, and the creative director saw, I was like, yeah, we can do that, but we only got 8 minutes. And then I was like, all right, now we got 5 minutes, 3 minutes, 1 minute. I was like, all right, we're wrapped, and everyone was clapped. Like, we got all our shots. Where if I wasn't like that, they easily could have shot product shots for another 2 hours.
Yeah, and only because I know the backstory here, I'll ask the question. You lost your principal car at one point, and you had to find duplicates.
So these are the problems young filmmakers don't anticipate is going to happen in their life. You're so concerned about the story sometimes as a producer, or the cameras and the light and all these exciting things, that it's these little details that can screw you up. So, they wanted Corvettes. So John and myself, we found 3 red Corvettes that had a match because there was 3 Corvettes in 3 different locations at all time. It was the only way to do it. We couldn't have done it with 1. We couldn't have done it with 2. It had to be 3. So we found 3 matching Corvettes. So me and John pick up these Corvette Stingrays, these like $85,000, $90,000 cars, the day before the job. Let me just so you know. And we're driving around Atlanta, and we get a call. No, and they need to be Camaros now. Like, of course
With
they do.
a half a day.
With a
before
half a
you're
day.
supposed- Yeah, it's amazing.
So we started scrambling, and we found 3 Camaros. There's no way we can find 3 matching ones. A lot of sports cars they ship down south for rentals and stuff, so we had to go to lots. So luckily in Atlanta, Fast and Furious is popular, so we found car clubs. So we found 3 Camaros, same body type, would have to color correct and post that they're all blue. Not a big deal. 8 o'clock at night, we find out that 2 of the Camaros back down. And that's when I was on the point with John going, we have to tell the client. It's 8 o'clock and we shoot in 12 hours. And we just lost 2 Camaros. So I call the client and I go, here's the deal. We found them. He goes, yeah, I know, we're excited. Yeah, we just lost 2. Don't worry. Called the car clubs up, like, guy's name is like Beast or something. I was like, dude, you gotta find these cars with us. Around 10 o'clock at night, we found a blue, which is the color they wanted, a green, and a red matching body types. I called him up. He goes, please send me pictures. So I sent the client the pictures, like, oh my God, you guys are like lifesavers. But then it was still the next day, are these guys going to show up?
Yeah.
So but it was until they all showed up on set, I was very scared. When they finally all showed up on set, that's when everything was breezy at that point.
And we haven't talked too much about producing, even though a lot of that story was producing focused. I mean, do you feel the added pressure, not just for yourself and your company, but everyone you've hired? It's their livelihood. If you didn't dot your I across your T, the whole thing could fall apart.
Yeah, and that's the one thing about being a producer or a production manager is you need to do your job and you need to let people be confident you know how to do your job. So when people want to try to change things, be like, no, this is the way it's going to get done. Like, I know how to get this production done from A to Z in a streamlined manner where we're going to capture everything the client wants. And you just have to voice your opinion. You just got to tell everyone when people bring up ideas, be like, yeah, great. No, we don't bring up new ideas on set. That change for a relay or anything. So we do our homework. We show up to set. Yeah, you are in charge of all these people. You hired all of them. You want them to be successful with you. You want the production to be successful so you can hire them again. So you just have to be very confident that you've done your homework and you're going to produce this correctly. You got to, when I talk to my directors, be like, guys, I get what you're trying to do. Let's get what the client and the story needs. And then you can have a little bit of fun shooting other stuff.
Yeah.
But this comes down to being a producer is project management insanity because a lot of projects going for months and months. You have a thing that has a very small finite window. 1 day, sometimes 2 days, maybe for like we did Napa, we had 4. But when that's over, it's done. If you don't have your shots, you don't have your commercial.
Yeah. I don't think, if you haven't been in the film industry, you haven't worked on a film set before, you might not realize, one, just how small the film industry is, how you sort of run into the same people over and over again, but also how under that pressure cooker, you sort of create a family or a nuclear unit. Do you find yourself shooting with the same people over and over again? And what are the reasons? Is it the comfortability, you're just confident in their capabilities, or is it because it does feel like working with friends and that's important to, as a director, to have that security blanket around you?
Working with the same people is one, yeah, because you become family, you became a friend. You bond on sets. You guys are trying to pull off miracles in a very short window. Another is because you learn who you can be collaborative with. I'll learn what directors like Kip or Ricardo, I know they work really well with Fernando, so I'm going to try to get Fernando to be the DP because that way they don't have to sit there and explain themselves to the DP all the time. Or I don't need to, if I'm the producer, explain to the director of photography my way of getting something done because they get it. But you also need to work with competent people. So unfortunately, if someone messes up a couple times, you have to kind of move on from that person, even if you are close. And that happens a lot. But it just comes down to, the camaraderie, the competency, and just, like minds are going to accomplish something a lot differently than a DP and a director who have completely different mindsets on how to accomplish a shot.
Yeah. Let's pull this back to where we started at, because there will be some people watching this that are, seniors in high school or just starting their film career. What are some of the most important things that you wished, whether it was in academia or just on a film set, you wish someone had told you when you were just starting out?
So one of the biggest things I learned is when I graduated, I wish I would have had someone told me to go I had a great internship, but I wish somebody would have told me to go get an internship at a studio or figure out where I want to find this bigger internship at and find another mentor. So I didn't really have a mentor after film school until I started working at Tampa Digital, and I worked underneath another director and creative director that kind of helped me shape myself as a director. And that took until 26, 27. That's a long time. I think people need to find the perfect internship or near perfect and find that mentor and figure out what they want to do in the industry early on, because that's going to help them become a lot happier and a lot more successful versus I made it, I figured it out, but it took me a lot longer than I wish it should have because I just never had anybody really tell me what to do.
Yeah.
And nobody likes to be told what to do, but sometimes that mentorship through an internship professor, whatever that is going to greatly benefit you and make you successful.
Would you, you went the MBA route, would you recommend other people find either through an educational means or just acquiring the knowledge, the business of filmmaking in addition to the creative aspects?
So I had a director, and when I was looking for directors, approached me once, and this is just a little bit of a story, and it's very accomplished, at age, awards everywhere, he's 60, and I go, why do you want to be on my roster? He goes, because nobody wants to hire me anymore, because I'm older. And that sparked something while I was so glad I got my MBA, because I realized I'm a commercial director. Commercial directors are only going to get hired so long because ad agencies want to work with the next young thing. So the business approach for me was because I wanted a backup, not like a different industry. I wanted to be able to take my directing career, and to be honest, I was young and I didn't even have a really good directing career at that point. But I was like, I know one day I want to be able to merge that into owning a business and having a production company. So that's why I went the business route. And funny enough, 10 years later, I started a production company with directors and producers, so it worked for me. I guess it's hard to say. I think some people may want to go and get their master's in arts and film because they know they just want to be a cinematographer and a director, and they honed in on that, and that's what I want to do. So I'm not sure I answered your question correctly, but
you did. And let's say someone does go the academic route, they go to a film school, maybe they're thinking about maybe getting an MFA or an MBA. Would you recommend they take some time off in between college to actually go out and work for a while?
100%, yeah. Yeah, I think if you're thinking about pursuing a graduate degree or just further your education, get out in the world and work for a couple of years and then go about it. Because what you learn in graduate programs, as you know, relates to your work life. But if you don't have a work life or a career, then there's nothing to relate it to. It's just words on a page and theories. But I got my graduate when I was already working and had a company at the time. So I was able to apply what I was learning in school into my business and into my career. And I think that is for any master's degree or further education.
Yeah. Do you consume a lot of media in your prep? So whether it's a commercial or feature film, are you looking at like-minded product spots or similar films, and are you learning from those? Are you, not to say the word steal, but are you trying to ape some sort of aspect that you like and create it your own?
Yeah, when I'm trying to produce let's say a commercial or film, I'll use commercial right now, is I try to do two things. I try to watch things that have nothing to do with the product or the brand I'm selling. The reason I do that is I think it's going to spark a lot more creativity if I watch, let's say I'm shooting an athletic commercial. I'm probably going to watch things like nonprofits and PSAs and find a grit that I think could work for the narrative of a commercial. So I like to do that. The reason I watch commercials that are similar to what I may be producing is so I don't do what they did. But then I try to watch things that are completely the opposite direction, try to dial that into what I'm trying to sell.
Yeah, and how often do you have a client come to you and say, make it look like this? I mean, I assume a lot of clients have sort of a preconceived idea of what they want. And do you feel that restrains you as a director? Do you try to honor that, or do you try to convince them, like, no, you're hiring me as a director because I have my own creative voice?
So what's funny is when people want to hire a director, they already want what they want on your reel. If it's a watch commercial, they want to know that you have that exact watch commercial on your reel. And that is the hardest thing about being a director, is everybody wants you to have what they want already in the can, so they know you're competent enough to get it.
Yeah.
The irony is that if nobody ever hires you to do something like that, how do you get that? So that is really problematic. And that's another reason why I started taking on other directors. When we're doing the Seiko commercial, they really wanted somebody who had watch experience. So it's really hard for me to get Kip, Ricardo, or myself, because none of us have, even though it's a shiny thing and we know we can shoot a shiny thing and tell the story, they're looking for that. Now, the one thing you can do to help avoid that, because you aren't going to get hired unless you already have that in your reel, is to shoot spec stuff. Create your own story. Just like if you're a filmmaker, go out there, shoot it, make it the best you can. If it doesn't come out great, realize that and do it again. Get a team of people, young producers and directors and DPs to go out there and shoot this spec work so you can win those jobs.
Do you find commercial filmmaking as rewarding as narrative filmmaking?
I do. Narrative filmmaking, you live with it for years, until you finish it, a year, year and a half. And it's really rewarding because you just accomplished something that a very small percentage of the world are able to complete.
Right.
Good or bad, it's like you got it done, and man, did we really work hard. So that's really rewarding. Commercial, yes, is great too, because you live with it for 2 months, a shorter amount of time, but you live and breathe these 30 seconds. And man, it's like if you don't nail it, if you don't make it visually compelling in 30, 60 seconds, whatever it's social media or broadcast, online video, people are going to know and it's not going to work.
Yeah.
And there's not an audience for commercials that don't work. So when you get that and you get the call from the agency and they're like, great work, this is unbelievable. It's a nice high. And the cool thing about working in commercials is you work on one project, you get that high, and then you're working on another one right away.
Do you actively try to find interns when you're filming? Do you believe in the mentorship process? Or are you always trying to have fresh young talent on set so you can bring them up as well?
Yeah, we are. Years ago, we started finding it was very hard to find good PAs. And it's funny, it's like, well, why do you care about a good PA? Because the PAs or intern PAs, they are those runners on set that are moving things as fast as possible to make sure that everybody else is capable enough to do their job. And we started finding that we weren't finding a lot of good interns and PAs. So that's when we started a mentor program like Jolt. And so we can find and try to mentor these guys to become people who are wise. They had set etiquette. They understood the industry. Even if though they're just a PA, we want you to understand the director's job. So you understand the duress and stress that they're going through. And it's worked. We mentored a lot of students. And on our last job, we had 3 of our students on our set being PAs, so it worked out great.
So you mentioned Jolt Production School. Tell us a little bit about that and where people can find more information.
You could go to joltproductionschool.com, find more information, find videos we've done. But like I said, the purpose of Jolt was to mentor young minds, to turn them into production assistants who would eventually find their dream job in our industry. And like I was just saying about if you never shot a watch commercial, it's hard to get hired as a watch commercial. If you don't have a good reel or a demo, I'm not saying great, but just something that shows that you know how to accomplish a 30-second commercial or a short film, then it's hard to find and get hired for your first job. So we help the students build their portfolio, build their reel to help them find those jobs. Even if it's not with us, at least they'll have that portfolio to find their entryway into this industry.
Right. 2 final questions. If someone is gravitating more towards commercial production, would you recommend they try to find a specialty? Maybe it's food, maybe it's fashion, maybe it's product spots, or is it more valuable to be sort of a jack of all trades?
I think at first try to be that jack of all trades. Eventually, you want to hone into a couple niches. I don't recommend going in just to one. I think having 2, maybe 3, if it's possible, is going to be a gateway into finding more work. Sometimes you get typecasted as the hospital director.
Yeah.
And which is good because you're gonna make a lot of money being the hospital director, but also have other things you can do as well in your wheelhouse. So you can be the hospital director, the food director, and then something else. And then I recommend never to turn work away either.
And so, final question now. I normally start with this question, but I forgot. But I think it's important to see, as far as the answer, a little bit about you. What is your favorite film and why? It could be as stupid as you want. My favorite film is Tombstone. So
I do love Tombstone. I have a lot of favorite films, but you ask me that anytime it says that on the survey when you're filling out for your password reminder, I always write Karate Kid.
Karate Kid.
It's just a story about a goofy guy who went to LA who never actually learned karate, yet he still won. It's obvious he didn't know karate, yet he still won. It's just such a stereotypical 80s goofy film. I love it. I could watch it like 1,000 times.
That's fantastic. You mentioned that.
And there's so many catchphrases in it, from put him in a body bag,
Sweep the leg.
sweep the leg. There's 1,000 one-liners.
That's amazing. Well, thank you so much for being here today. I really
Cool.
appreciate your time. Once again, if people want to learn more about Jolt Production School, where do they go?
JoltProductionschool.com.
And if they want to know more about you, where do they go?
You go to PeteGuzzo.com for myself. You can also go to CustomBuilt.tv, and that'll take you to my production company website.
Okay.
It's spelled just like you think, CustomBuilt.tv.
And do you have a Twitter, Facebook, Instagram?
We have a Facebook and an Instagram page as well, which you can find on the website.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you, Pete Guzzo.
Awesome.
I
Thank you,
appreciate your
Tyler.
time and effort.
Appreciate it, man.
Once again, my name's Tyler Martinolich. I appreciate you guys tuning in. We have a ton of great guests coming up, and I hope you will research a little more
Yes,
about
please.
Pete, but also Jolt Production School. It's really important that you, whether it's Jolt Production School or a similar program that you track down, it's really important to find mentorship opportunities where you're not only bettering yourself, but you're building relationships that hopefully will pay off and lead to jobs and further experience in the future. So hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for tuning in.